All right, we are on. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Weekly Dose with Dr. Uday. I have a treat for you. I have Dr. Alexandra here with us. We're going to be talking all about relationships and how to improve your relationship and marriage and all that good stuff. We're going to be asking a lot of candid questions in hopes that it will help anybody out there. So I'm going to start with introductions and then we're going to get right into it. So, for those that don't know me, my name is Dr. Uday. I'm a board certified family medicine physician. I'm based in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I co own a primary care practice, namely Apple Valley Family Medicine. And I also provide aesthetic services to my clients. So, with both modalities, my goal is to have my patients not only feeling good, but looking good. So, Dr. Alexander, I'm actually going to let you introduce yourself. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today. And I'm so excited to have to talk about this interesting topic, but I'll let you go.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be here. And every time I hear or read the name Apple Valley Family Practice, it's sort of a sexy name in a very wholesome way. So I really love it.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So I trained in family medicine and I had my own small practice north of Boston for a number of years. And then, really, because everything that I had ever done, I felt like since I was a teenager, it was always a means to an end. Now, I liked the end. I liked being a doctor. At that time, I was married with 3 children. I now have 4, but I had 3 then. And I really loved practicing medicine. There wasn't any particular part of my life that I was like deeply dissatisfied with, but this feeling of always needing to do something in order to achieve something else, it
Mm,
left me not really enjoying the present moment, not doing
mm,
things for their own sake, not really having the kinds of attention and intention that are essential for intimacy, sensuality, sexuality, but also just sitting outside on a chair in the sunshine, feeling the sun on my face. I didn't, I lost connection. I suppose we're all born with that. So let me just say I lost, but I don't remember exactly when it dropped off.
mm, mm.
The ability to just enjoy what I was experiencing
Right.
rather than even cooking dinner, going on vacation. It was always so that something else could be achieved, so that we would have happy
Mm,
memories. So a lot of things happened. First one, and then my other parent passed. And there were a number of things that made this pressing for me in my mid 30s. And I took a sabbatical. I thought I'd go back to medicine. And my goal really was to be able to do things for the pleasure because I wanted to, not in order to accomplish some other goal. And at first, I really didn't know what to do. I sat by the river. I took a painting class, but I just wasn't, I didn't know how to really reconnect with the part of myself that actually was the portal to aliveness and pleasure and generosity too, a kind of vitality in life. So I really went on a journey that I didn't know where it was going. I certainly didn't have a roadmap, but I did. I transformed my life and
That's amazing.
learned to really be in the moment. And I'll just say that part of that journey, eventually I felt like, okay, I know how to sit down and enjoy dinner with my family. I know how to really get lost in a painting class. I know how to laugh or just be still with myself. But the aliveness didn't come all the way into the bedroom, which is a place where
Mm,
it's really, really
so
important.
important.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I just want to say one more thing, which is that my husband and I met in medical school. He's a pain management
Um,
doctor. We loved one another. We've always loved one another deeply. But with medical school and training, residency, and I had one child, my third year of medical school, one just before my internship. We just really didn't have time for the
Mhm.
phase that most people associate with, a weekend getaway, exploring one another's bodies for hours, like all of these things that the poets write about were
Yes.
not part of our relationship because there just wasn't time. And I thought once we had time, well, we love one another, we communicate well, our values are aligned, we love sharing our life together. Clearly, the heat is going to get hot when we have the
Mhm.
time and we're not sleep deprived. And then about 10 years in,
That's right.
we had our weekends off, our evenings off. He'd work the occasional weekend, but mostly we had a phase before we had more children where we didn't have kids in diapers.
Mhm.
We had our evenings together. And while we still loved one another very deeply, I realized for us and
Mhm.
for pretty much every other couple, it is
Mhm.
not just time that we're
Yes.
missing. And I think when people hear that I didn't even say this yet, but I'm an intimate marriage expert and a relationship and intimacy coach, and people assume, oh, I'm working with people whose relationships are falling apart. And I certainly have the skills to do that and have done that. But I have to say, my real mission, my heart is with couples who love one another. They're
Absolutely.
not thinking about divorce.
Right.
They just don't really know how to have erotic vitality and to really experience pleasure and passion and have it grow and amplify with the years together, as it certainly can once we learn how.
That
So
is,
that's me and my introduction.
yeah, that is beautiful. And it just to kind of reiterate that, busy households, like, because I have a similar situation where, both I and my doctor, my husband are both physicians, and, went through that whole process of medical school, 3 children, and all that. So everything that you're talking about, I'm like, yes. And that whole, like, wait for when the time comes, it's like the horizon. You just,
It
that
keeps
time,
moving
it
away. That's right.
keeps moving.
And really, it's a lack of education because
Mhm.
when we have a spouse whom we really love, we want to do life with them as we are, but the intimacy is kind of flat, dehydrated, neutral, or doesn't even have to be that far. It can just be like not wonderful. Like I wanted to have the kind of sex with my husband where afterwards I
Mhm.
felt so much closer. Not that it was like a fun mechanical activity, but that it really opened up our souls, like the poets write about.
Right.
And that takes education because very few people, I mean, I would say no one, but technically I don't know that for sure. We
Mhm.
don't have that modeled really by our parents, but also anywhere else, books, movies,
Mhm.
porn, church instruction. Like we just don't have the education
Mhm.
to be passionate.
Sure. So actually, so one of the questions I have for the couples that you see, what obstacles, and you may have touched on some of this, what are the most common obstacles that people have? I think you mentioned time is one of them, but you can expand.
Yeah, well, the thing that I see most commonly is not actually the reason that they believe they come to me. But one of the things which is often the starting point, so I just want to share that, but it's not because somebody says, "Oh, that's why I want to talk to you." But
Mhm.
in fact, when when the individuals in a couple are highly educated, highly competent, ambitious, and achieving, they
Mhm.
are used to having the skill set to identify what needs attention, to see challenges, to see problems, and know how to fix them. You might research, you know how to do X, Y, and Z. And so one of the things that most of my clients have in common is that it's very unnerving to be
Mm.
professionally accomplished, to feel pretty confident as a parent,
Mhm.
and yet in this extremely important area of intimacy,
Mhm.
not feel confident, not
Mhm.
really know even where to go for solutions or what kinds of considerations there are and how to change things,
Mm.
and often not really knowing exactly what they want, just knowing that what it is not what they want it to be. In other words, either the quality of sex or the frequency of sex or the level of emotional intimacy, people often know they want more without being able to say specifically what it is that they want. And I think the first real challenge is being someone who's used to being competent, handling challenges as they arise,
Mhm.
and not actually knowing how to do that in
Mm.
this arena. So I would say that most of my clients are in that circumstance, but what they would say about why they come to see me is that they're not connecting as
Mm.
much as they want to. They may put it in terms of closeness and connection and
Right.
emotional intimacy, and they
Mhm.
may put it in terms of sparks flying, passion, libido, frequency of sex.
Mhm.
And really, whether they talk about it in the more emotional terms or they talk about it in the more sexual terms,
Mhm.
the root cause is usually the same thing.
Gotcha. Now, I guess I wanted to ask your approach when you get, a client or a new client. So, what are the things that, just kind of a brief overview of when someone comes to you, your process of beginning to help them?
Yeah, I'll share that, but let me step one step
Sure.
back and say,
Absolutely.
because there are many different kinds of sex therapists, relationship coaches, intimacy coaches. And so my unique, because I created it, but fundamental philosophy is uncompromising intimacy, which I'll define. That's Uncompromising Intimacy is the name of my book. And it's really based on this truth that far and away the most common relationship advice that is given is that if you want a great marriage, you need to be good at compromise. If you want to be happy, compromise is the way to get there. This is the most common advice, and there are many Hallmark wedding cards that say the exact same thing. And that is completely wrong. If you want a bland, pleasant companionship, compromise is a great way to create that. But if you want passion and erotic evolution and pleasure and expansion, and to really have the intimacy in your relationship, intimacy of all kinds, emotional, sensual, erotic, really lighting you up and fueling all the other things you do in your life, compromise will just never get you that. Because when we compromise, we are disconnecting from, turning away from, or withholding a part of ourselves so that our partner can be more comfortable. It's like when we walk in our door to come home, we leave some part of us at the door so that our partner isn't threatened, is more comfortable. We keep the peace.
Right.
Now, I'm not a fan of the opposite, which is being totally demanding, saying exactly what you need and expecting it to happen. That is not a road to intimate connection either. But what is what I call uncompromising intimacy, which is really about knowing yourself and sharing the full truth of who you are, your desires, your challenges, and doing it in a way that your partner can hear it and ideally share as well, because that is one of the foundations to ongoing passion and pleasure in a marriage. So, back to your question about how I start, the first place I start 100% of the time is by asking each person, what do you want? And I actually do that in a questionnaire before our first meeting, because I want each person to be free to answer that question without it being complicated that their spouse hears it. So the questionnaires are filled out separately and not with instruction not to share with one another. So there's nothing holding people back. And so before we have our first conversation, I hear her, if I'm talking to a heteronormative couple, I hear her response about what she wants and what's missing in the relationship. And I hear his response about what he wants and what's missing in the relationship. And I also have them each briefly describe their relationship and identify their priorities in terms of living their life, like what's most important, career, spirituality, family, just to get a sense of them, so that then when we meet, the thing I have my attention on is how can each of them share their desires with one another in a way that they can have a conversation that actually brings them closer together, rather than having desires divide them or unnerve them or whatever. So it's about making it safe to share their desires, and then teaching skills so that they can have all the different kinds of communications that a couple needs to have, which includes problem solving, logistics, venting, vulnerable communications, conflict, comfortable silence together. They're making a request. There's so many kinds of communications that when you practice making them in your daily life, they translate quite readily into the bedroom as well. So that's the starting place, because I want people to have skills that then they can use in the bedroom, because they already know that they know how to communicate. Because unquestionably, a key to lasting passion is being able to communicate about your experience and your desires in the bedroom and have those conversations turn you on, rather than be full of shame and separation.
That is beautiful. So yes, that's an amazing answer to that question. Now, what for someone that is listening, or a couple that's listening, that want to improve their intimacy and improve their connection with their partner, along those lines, what actionable tips would you give them that they can start with today moving forward?
Well, I'm going to answer, but I want to give a warning label and say this is going to sound so simple that if you don't actually do it, you're going to dismiss it and think that's no help at all. But
Simple to do, simple not to do, right?
simple to do, simple not to do, massive results when done with care. And that is to cultivate curiosity. So when we are with someone for a while, invariably, we feel like we know them. We know we've asked the questions. So maybe there's some new things that arise. And I think this contributes to this bizarre and real statistic that the majority of couples spend less than 4 minutes a day discussing anything other than logistics and kids. And so that's where the newness arises, the new conversations about the kids, what they've done, what they need, and logistics. But really, there's so much more to a human being than logistics and what the kids need. So we tend, when we first fall in love, to have so many questions. Where is that scar from? And if you weren't in this profession, what would you do? And are there any other countries you've wanted to live in? Where have you traveled? Did you like vegetables when you were young? What are your favorite books? Like, I could just go on and on. We have an insatiable curiosity, and that is inherently part of the feeling of being in love. And then we get the real loveliness of safety and security and feeling like we know our partner well. And unfortunately, that often comes at the cost of curiosity. So without sacrificing any of the safety, security, steadiness that the two of you have together. It is amazing to just ask curious, open-ended questions, the kind of questions where there's no right or wrong answer, and you can just listen to get to know your spouse in new ways. And if you're listening and you want to get started, just pick something that you're curious about. It can be whimsical, like if you could be president of any country, what would it be and what policies would you implement? Or if you could have dinner with a celebrity, alive or dead, who would it be? You can start with completely non-threatening questions, or you can ask, what was the highlight of this past week for you? And, if you have a child who got married last week, hopefully that's the answer. But if it's ho-hum life as usual, you don't know what was the highlight, or maybe what was the most challenging part of this past week. If we could move anywhere without any complications, where would you rather live? Just start asking the questions. And I'll share that I was giving a talk on cultivating curiosity, vulnerable communications, and emotional intimacy. And this woman came to my talk. She didn't intend to come at all. She was there for the talk afterwards. She arrived early. She thought she'd listen. She'd been married for 35 years. And the reason she didn't intend to come to my talk is she had a good marriage. She felt perfect. She had no complaints. It was a good marriage. But she listened, and she went home and she asked her husband a few questions that she'd never asked before. And the next day she messaged me and said, it was amazing.
Wow.
We felt more intimate than we had in 5 years, and we made love, and there was this special flavor to it. And it was all from asking a few questions. So this is why I say it's very, if you're like on the verge of divorce, do I think asking a few questions is going to change the course? No, I do not. Although being curious is always helpful. But if you have a good, solid marriage, get curious. Let your spouse reveal things to you that you don't know, and maybe you didn't even know to ask before, because it adds juice, it adds connection.
That's beautiful. So now, actually, thank you for that amazing tip. The other one I tend to ask my guests is, with all the experiences that you've had, all the life that you've lived so far, if you got to meet your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them, or what would you advise them?
Wow. I think I would, let me think for a minute. I have a lot of different options, and I'm currently doing some personal growth work myself. So this is a very
The
rich,
loaded question.
curious question. Yes. What would I say? I think I would say, how much more can you experience in each moment?
That's nice.
That's what I'd say. And I mean that physically, emotionally, intellectually. Like, how can the same experiences be more nutritious?
I love it. I love it. Very good. I always ask that question because there's always somebody listening that could benefit from that. So I guess we're wrapping up. Thank you so much. This was so good. If anybody out there is trying to connect with you, look you up, how can they do that?
AlexandraStockwell.com. That's my website. From there, you can find links to my social media, where you're welcome to DM me. You can also connect with me on my website. And when you go to my website, alexandrastockwell.com, you can download the first chapter of my book, Uncompromising Intimacy. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, you will definitely enjoy that chapter.
I love it. And is the book out, or has it been
Oh,
out?
yes. You can get the whole book as well. But if you're somebody who likes hors d'oeuvres, you want to sample it, download the first chapter, or you can just go straight to Amazon or Audible and get the whole book, which is all more of the same of what we've been talking about today.
I love it. I love it. All right. Dr. Alexandra, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
This
for the
was
pleasure.
so good. So, guys, definitely check her out. If you're definitely interested in more information, get her book. And then on the flip side, if you're looking for a primary care, quality primary care physician, we are accepting new patients at Apple Valley Family Medicine. You can call us at 304-350-1087, or you can look us up online at www.applevalleyfamilymed.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and you guys have a wonderful week. Bye. Sounds good.